welcome to the Troublesome Terps. At long last, we're sort of kind of back for tonight. And with that being said, I'm Alexander Gansmeyer. And you've already heard him broadcasting live from his living room, Alexander Drexel. Hey, Alex, how are you?
Hey, Alex, how are you? I'm doing really well. Yeah, we kind of spoiled the news there already, so if you've been paying attention, you know what the show is going to be about. But before we get to that, let's welcome the third German in the room, Sarah Hickey. Good evening. How are you, Sarah?
Hello. Yeah, I'm very happy to be here because this podcast always lifts my spirits. Yeah, and also because we haven't been here in a little while, so it's nice to be back. And yeah, last but not least, our most important host of the night, I think, Mr. Dr. Jonathan Downey.
I was going to say, going with the last theme, I'm definitely not making any shoes. That's a cobbling joke, if anyone knows anything about making shoes. Yeah, this is a really big episode. It's a pleasure to be here for this special episode. Should we just say what's going on? Because I'm trying to string this out as long as I can, and it's getting to the point. So, 2 announcements. I'm going to do the personal one first. This is my final ever Troublesome Terps. For lots of reasons, I've had to cut down on commitments and to change a few things. This is my last ever Troublesome Terps. You'll find out what I'm getting up to later on in the show. And the three current Troublesome Terps hosts have an announcement about the future of the podcast.
Yeah, I'm going to leave that one to one of the two Alexes, even though I would say, well, first of all, you may have noticed that we haven't been here in a little while, in 2 months, because frankly, we were all a little bit busy, and we needed to spend some time thinking of what the future of this podcast should look like. And so definitely one thing is certain, and that is that this is the last episode in this format with all 4 of us. And we have some ideas for what the podcast could look like in the future, and that may potentially involve all of you.
The biggest podcast panel ever.
Everyone who's ever listened needs to get into the podcast. No, I was just going to say, before we get into the future of the podcast, I think it would be nice to take one last trip down memory lane. I know the Christmas episode was just around the corner, more or less, figuratively speaking, in terms of
a long corner
released, but it's a very long corner. Well, it's been a very long 2 years, so I think we're kind of used to that. The relativity of time, right?
Yeah, what is time anyway?
What is time anyways? All made up.
So it's a really useful herb.
Oh my god. That was yeah.
And if you wanted another reason why I'm leaving the podcast,
he's getting kicked out. Too many dad jokes. We couldn't handle it.
the pun count is going to drop dramatically from now on.
Oh my god. Yeah, but I mean, we've been here for quite a while. I actually forgot to look up when our first episode aired. I was going to do that. The very, very first one, which was
Spring 2016.
Dictionaries on Legs.
13th of February 2016.
That seems accurate. Wow.
6 years.
It's been a while, yeah. Wow.
I have had 3 children in the time we've been hosting this podcast.
That's wild.
Yeah, okay, that makes the podcast feel old, and that makes me feel ancient.
Exactly. Sarah had an addition to the family as well.
More wisely.
Yeah. Exactly. But don't worry, we're not gonna go through all the episodes that we've ever recorded. No.
Or all the children.
We love all the children. Exactly. But it certainly provided us with a lot of great opportunities to meet great people, have a lot of wonderful guests, and I think the guests would be the people that we need to thank first, and maybe even the most, for bearing with us, for hours and hours of conversations. But I like to believe they were all quite interesting and maybe insightful and funny, and maybe sometimes not so funny. We've had some serious topics over the years, as we are wont to do with the name, Troublesome Terps. And I think we were going to get into, sort of favorite moments and highlights. I think the live episode we did in London was still sort of the absolute highlight for me. I don't know about you, but sort of the mix of
that was great.
Doing a live episode first, doing it abroad, doing it in London in a pub with a live audience. I think that a lot of things were coming together, and it was the first time that all three of us were in the same room together. So that was mind-blowing.
Because for years, I actually had a theory that the two Alexes were just one person doing really dodgy German accents.
It's true. We're very similar.
Because
we're almost twins, basically.
We were just talking about that before you guys joined us. I mean, it's basically the spitting image of each other.
Yeah.
I was going to say as well, though,
you were like the bananas in pajamas, B1 and B2. You're A1 and A2.
I have no idea what that is, but it is very funny.
You don't know Bananas in Pajamas?
Great.
It's great. They have the catchiest songs this side of Teletubbies.
Okay. Well, the other thing is that for the first couple of years, we recorded with no video.
That's true.
All we had was sound. And so, the very early days of me in the lounge, hoping the Wi-Fi signal would reach it and stuff. But one of the things that I think we should take credit for, and I'm sure the sign language interpreters would tell me that we weren't the first, but I think we were the first spoken language interpreting podcast to seriously cover interpreter burnout and mental health. And I think we've come to it a couple of times. And to me, the highlight is that practically from day one, we have lived up to the billing of dealing with the things that keep interpreters up at night. And we've not shied away from difficult subjects. It's kind of difficult. I don't really want to pick a favourite episode, but I think the one that made the biggest difference in the podcast for me was the episode where we had Sarah on. So Sarah's episode before she became a host. Like we did that episode, and then we got to Geneva, and the two Alexes and I were like, we should ask her, shouldn't we?
She's the one.
Yeah, we probably should. And you just knew then.
A lot of trouble. I said.
You surely did.
But the Alex's highlight is the live episode. I think my episode highlight was the one we recorded in Geneva, where it felt like, you have all of these, what we call in Scotland, high hegians, all these leaders and experts in interpreting. And then you have two Germans and a mad Scotsman doing the closing session. And I think it was good because I think we succeeded. We got people being honest. We got people saying things that maybe they wouldn't necessarily normally say in front of an audience, but the atmosphere was there. And I think we recorded a really cool episode as well. So Geneva for me was the absolute highlight, and it made me realise that suddenly interpreting was taking podcasting seriously. And there just seems to be an explosion of interpreting podcasts recently. It's incredible.
Well, for me, one of the things is that, well, I feel like I can say these things because I'm not really part of the active interpreting community anymore. Well, one of the things I've always found very difficult, even at the very beginning, was I feel like it can be nice that's a very close-knit community, but it can also be very difficult. And from the beginning, there's so many rules and you don't want to make the wrong step. And it's nice to have a place like this where you can talk about the more controversial topics as well. And I think it's a testament to the three of you, like that you have so many people that are listening as well. Because, I mean, I know I joined later, but it's really, I was like coming to like this completely like ready nest and just sat in it, But you guys started all this. And like people say that it's not so much about the one who starts a new movement, but it's about the first follower, and you guys have a ton of followers. So I feel like there's demand out there that for the interpreting community to also talk about the uncomfortable topics, that maybe, or at least to hear about them, because I feel like oftentimes it's not so easy to address them in public. There's a lot of barriers. There's a lot of fear of upsetting somebody and it having a negative effect on your career then because it's so close-knit as well. And I felt like when I came across you guys there as well, that kind of really gave me hope and gives me hope now as well that maybe it started something,
That makes us sound so important. I like that.
Yeah, I wanna finish the episode right here.
Yeah, I know. Like this is always at a high note. But I mean, I do have to say about the Geneva episode. It's also one of my favorite ones. I don't know if I can choose because that was the one. Oh no, actually, it was the one afterwards. The one after was the first one with Sarah, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think I joined more or less or immediately
much
after,
right
or the
after.
one after
Yeah.
that, or something. And the first year in review, then for me immediately.
Yeah, we had you as a plant in the audience, so you were effectively part of the team, for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, that's
It's
true.
true. I was already somewhere on that episode.
Yeah,
You were
I
already
think-
causing
exactly.
trouble.
But I do want to give a shout out to Kilian, who he was the one who asked us to host the panel and do this live episode.
That's true.
And I think that was I don't know if courageous is the right word, but I think that was a really bold move, and I'm really grateful to him for that. So credit where credit is due.
What an experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, even now, like 2 years later, I still like cast my mind back to Geneva and realise how big a deal it was. They say that you don't realise big deals until you've lived through them, and I think Geneva felt like a big deal. And I was watching Sarah on the end of the aisle with like her stack of Nimsy research. I'm like, this is going to be a good day.
She came to play.
Yes.
It's like it's like the person. Have you ever interpreted and you get one person in the meeting who brings like a brick thick worth of paperwork, and you're like, this is going to be an interesting meeting.
Yeah.
And you
It
saw
was
them.
very
You
weird.
saw Sarah on the end of that aisle, and I'm like, well, we know who to go to with question one.
Yeah, it was because it was so different from all the other industry events that I go to. Yeah, of course, for like NIMSY, for example, where it's completely normal. Everyone has their stuff with them, and everyone having like these discussions together. Whereas this was, of course, more like academic, and nobody knew me there, with the exception of maybe 3 people or something. And there wasn't much in terms of market research, which makes sense given the setting, of course. But basically, I was completely out of place, except for the fact that I also am a trained conference interpreter. And so I've been in touch with this side before, but I wasn't really there anymore, and I'm not really there anymore. So yeah, totally like a fish out of water, but I kept splashing.
You surely did. And a splash you made.
Sometimes that's a good place to be. Is the fish out of water.
Yeah.
Was her first episode your highlight then, Alex G? Sarah's first kind of episode as a host, was that your highlight? Because you were in the middle of telling us what your highlight we took over, which
I just think that was one of the things, because the podcast with Sarah just kind of became like its final form, right? So like the troublesome foursome, and I like the format with the 4 of us. I think that Sarah added a lot to the podcast. Not that we were lacking before, but I think she just was like the cherry on top of everything of a big podcast Sunday. So I do think like from that on, there was definitely a new era that I really enjoyed.
I got quite a few, I don't know about you guys, but I got quite a few Twitter messages and DMs and emails saying, hey, it's a good thing you've got a woman on the podcast.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
In an
So
industry
we
like this.
kept getting these reminders. Ooh.
I know.
There was a running joke for a while that I kept coming across where Troublesome Terps was the place where all of the male interpreters hang out because there are only 3 of them. They need their own podcast because that's where they live.
Yeah, like a safe space.
Yeah, and I have no problem being the quota woman here. Same as the quota Scotsman, Jonathan.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because being a Scotsman's a protected characteristic. Someone came to visit translators and interpreters in Scotland, and I'd spent time with them. I don't want to say who they were, but they said to me, I have a colleague who says they listen to such and such a podcast for the intellectual content and Troublesome Terps for the fun. I was like, yeah, that'll do.
Well, I mean, that's kind of how we got started out, right? Because initially the whole thing was supposed to be we're just sitting around. Like the concept of the podcast was you're sitting in the pub with your mates and just talking about stuff that bothers you, that is kind of troublesome and whatever. And then we became very, not formalized, but professionalized in a way. Initially, it was just the 3 of us, and then we had guests on, and then we had serious guests, and then we had like very serious topics. And, we had the live episodes with tickets and everything. Then we went to Geneva, which is super important. And we had the what was it, the podcast slam? The podcastival.
I was looking at the episode list and the number of important people who trusted us in our first year. Like, that's crazy. And Alex was saying about thanking the guests, and I think the guests have really helped so much. All of our most popular episodes are ones where we've had guests on. I don't think that's I can't even think of the word, it's too late tonight. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think our top one is still the Judy and Ewan one on business. And you could see, so we get access to the stats of how well each episode does, and you could see from the stats what there was a real need for. A couple of them I was surprised, like I was surprised that the sore throat episode didn't get more listens. Maybe people find that again, they might find it useful during remote interpreting or something. Maybe we needed a sore ear episode. Are you wearing the right headset?
Yes, I feel like it's still so, even in, the modern world that we live in, where everyone, like, you keep hearing these things of how normal it is, and how accepted it is now if you have a mental health problem. And, people say things like, well, if you had a cold, you would treat it too, or well, maybe you wouldn't with a cold much, but, get the idea. Or you wouldn't be ashamed of it. But there is still so much stigma around it. Like, I know some friends of mine who are doctors who have been dealing with some stuff, and they didn't want it on their records, so they're doing it privately and things like that because, are there any potential repercussions? Or I think there's so many more people that are dealing with mental health problems. And I myself in the last year have struggled significantly with depression, and that is one of the main reasons why I've been really open about it. Like, I don't have a problem sharing it here. I've shared it with everyone I know because I feel like if we keep saying we want to change this stigma around it, then we can't just keep hiding. Like, I'm not trying to push anybody if it's too private for you. Totally understandable because it's hard to talk about. But at least for me, I felt like I don't care. Who knows? I'm struggling with this. I still am, and it sucks. But it helps sometimes to know that, other people are struggling with it too. And, still life goes on and there are ways to deal with it. Same as, when I was in the hospital for some other issues, physical ones, I also didn't try to hide it from people, so.
Yeah, Friday night I was at a session taken by a guy called Patrick Regan. And he was talking about mental health, and he was talking about how sometimes the environments that you think you can go to get support, they're not actually equipped to help you. And he talked about his battles with it and how he still struggles. And I thought, to be able to open that door, and even to admit, like last week for me was a horrible week because I found out I wasn't going to get funding, and I realised that I'd built far too much of my hope around that and so on. And so you realise that mental health is a lot like physical health. Sometimes you have long-term issues that need treatment, and sometimes you have a couple of days or whenever that you just need to work on. And I think that analogy to physical health is really, really useful because it means that I heard someone recently saying, these people who have mental health, and I felt like saying everyone has mental health. It's just some people have mental health problems at the moment. It's like saying, oh no, he's got physical health. Yes, it's called being alive. And that's kind of even restructuring the way that we speak and restructuring the way that we think and realising that there are ways through difficulties, and there are people who sometimes all you need to do is listen, and there are people who can signpost you to the right people. So yeah, if you need help, please go get it, because it's going to be life-changing for you.
Yeah, and actually for me, having started therapy as well made me realize that I think everyone should try therapy, whether you're struggling or not. I've learned so much about myself I was never aware of. I feel like, why didn't I try this before? So I can highly recommend it. You don't need to be struggling to go for it and learn a little bit more about yourself.
I think a lot of people who do start therapy actually say that. And there's a Belgian comedian who also talks very openly about mental health issues, and I think she said once that basically the comparably tiny amount of people who are in therapy kind of have to do that because so many people don't have therapy, so you kind of do it for the for the benefit of everyone, which is unfair, but yeah, that's the way it is.
I like that actually. And yeah, for me, and like, I, in my role at Nimsy, I talk to a lot of business owners, CEOs, and all that. Yeah, and honestly, 90% at least will tell you that it's the people that make the company. Yeah. And I think that's true for most jobs. It's about the people, about the people, you have nothing. And everyone keeps talking about how great their team is and all that stuff and putting people first. But at the same time, I feel like we see very, very few people, very few businesses as well, or the individual leaders in it who are actually willing to live up to what they're saying there. It's annoying me sometimes that it's more of a buzzword to be people-centric rather than actually being people-centric. I know it's not as straightforward, but still, I would hope that some of this maybe changes, maybe especially now also that we've had the Great Resignation, which I think ties in with that, to be honest.
And I was going to say, if you're on the board of an association, and I know associations regularly look at their member benefits, could you please look at providing access of some sort to some kind of mental health support service? There are ones available that you can tie into. There are kind of other training that you could do that you could put people through. So please, I know associations regularly look at member benefits because I've been there. I understand the pressure of being on the board of an association, but this is something, associations are always talking about the future of the profession. How do we invest in the profession and how do we grow the profession? If we want there to be an interpreting profession in a few years' time, we have to be investing in interpreter mental health now. So things like there are very few qualified professional supervisors, so people who work on emotional resilience and ethical decision making. There are very few of them available. The ones who are available, please contact. Let's see if we can get more. Let's see if we can get more people access to that. There are things that we can be doing individually, thinking about therapy, thinking about support. There are things that we can be doing as associations. And also, I got a memory back from Facebook recently when I went to the TLC conference in Warsaw and did a talk/workshop on your support team. And it's to date, it's the only talk workshop that I've ever done that I've seen people cry in, and someone came up to me at the end and explained to me how much it meant to them. And I realised then that probably still the unspoken assumption in most of interpreting is everyone gets by themselves, and the truth is no one gets by on their own.
I think you can apply that to society, to be honest.
Yeah.
I agree. A lot more needs to be done. Sorry, I totally lost my train of thought, and I also interrupted you, Jonathan. So it's lose situation for me.
It's okay. I needed a drink of water in this lovely conference bottle.
But I think it's definitely very helpful when you feel supported by, either your company or your association, your colleagues. Ideally, I hope you're all feeling supported by your families. It makes a really, really big difference, and feeling like you're completely in it alone. And of course, when it comes to jobs, we all have jobs and we're afraid to be maybe out of the job too much for health reasons, and the effect that might have. And so feeling supported there as well, I think, can be a really big help, because I think that's also one part where people drag it out too much and not get help.
Well, I also made a realisation with my physical health today, and it's very similar with mental health, that I realised a couple of years ago that I was either going to take some time out of my day to work on my physical health, or I was going to end up losing more days because I didn't have my physical health. And so I now I'm currently recovering from injury, but I now try to run regularly 3 times a week if I can, which means that my working day is shorter. But it's better a shorter working day than a shorter working life. And I was chatting to someone who'd recovered from an injury, and I said, I got COVID and I was finding it tough to get back, and I got this very stern but helpful message saying, get back as soon as you can, because your children need you and your friends need you. And I'm suddenly like, yeah, we don't just work on our physical health and our mental health for us. We work on it because there are people who love us, who want us to do well. And I think that's... I'm going to get a teary episode. But I think that's important, in that to be able to... if you think, I'm just getting fit because I feel like getting fit. No, actually, you getting fit is adding to other people. The first book that I wrote was all about adding value, and I think that's something that I've now realised is so important, is your self-care is your gift to others as well.
Absolutely. And also but it's also super valid to do it for your gift to yourself, Both, I think, is very valid. And I agree completely. Also, what I said applied just as much to physical health. I think that's also all too common that people drag it out too much there, barely hanging on. I think that's one thing that the pandemic has shown us also. Now everyone is keeping their distance from everybody as soon as they have a slight cough or sneeze. We don't usually do that when we're sick before, and just keep going, and meet others and all that stuff. So yeah, times are different now.
Exactly. Probably a good time to move on to what happens next for the four of us. I mean, we're not gonna keep doing the podcast, but we're still doing exciting stuff, I think. So we wanted to give you just a very brief, update on what we've been up to. So Jonathan, do you want to go first?
Yes, so I have launched a new podcast with Lauren Albizo on church interpreting, and because it's on church interpreting, its title is The Church Interpreting Podcast. The episodes, we're trying to keep every episode under half an hour. I think the first one was actually 18 minutes. And it's available currently on Acast, Spotify and Stitcher. Trying to get it listed elsewhere, that'll take time. It should be on Google Podcasts as well already. So it's called the Church Interpreting Podcast. If you're interested in church interpreting, or you didn't realise that church interpreting existed, or you just wonder what on earth it is, check it out, have a listen. I'm currently working on planning out the next episode. Suddenly, when there's only two of you, there's a lot more planning that goes on. But it's going to come out roughly monthly, probably. I'm not making any commitment right now, but we're trying to explore an underexplored area of interpreting, and it's one that actually seems to be growing commercially as well. So I've had quite a few paid church and Christian interpreting assignments recently, which has been something I've been passionate about for 14 years. So it's great to be able to talk about it.
That's really nice. Even though I wasn't sure you were able to keep anything to 18 minutes almost.
Yeah, I'm skeptical, but
it's only 18 minutes and it's me doing the editing. So
I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself.
It's me doing the editing, and when we set up each show, we give each other times, and we have to fit inside the time slot. And the guys on this podcast, Alex, and Sarah, will believe me when I say that I haven't yet managed to record my time slot in one take yet. I don't know why that is.
Beats me. I have no idea.
Yeah, but in all seriousness, Jonathan, I think I'm really happy for you that this is finally something that you're able to do after such a long time of being passionate about it. I'm going to check it out.
Yeah, it's great fun, and it's lovely because there's now a growing church interpreting community thanks to a guy called Mike LeMay, who quite a few people have seen on Twitter and Instagram and stuff. He started it, and it's just ballooning. And so, we're talking about communities and about support. It's because the church interpreting community, because we have a very close shared common experience, even more so than conference interpreting, which can vary between countries. Church interpreting is basically the same wherever you are, and so we have a lot of shared experience and a lot of shared jokes and stuff, and it's a really supportive place to be because people understand kind of from the gut what it's like to, jump in and suddenly the pastor goes off notes and you're like, okay, this is going to be interesting. So it's great fun, and we're trying to keep the podcast informative and fun, and there should be 2 really nice interviews coming up as well. I'm just teeing them up and trying to get them recorded.
Sounds great. Yeah, so check out that new podcast. I think we can probably put the link in the show notes, can we, Alex? And
I'm sure
Sarah,
we can.
you good. I mean, you can. That's what you do. So check out the show notes, and if you want to hear Sarah live, you can also do that. Actually, you've been doing quite a lot of live stuff. I am currently catching up on your YouTube session on the language industry overview. So that's a long one. So I've only now gotten around to that.
Yeah.
It's not really the latest thing you've been doing, but people can find you over on Nimsy Live, of course, quite often.
Yeah, so basically from Nimsy we have a YouTube channel, and then whenever we go live, it shows up on all of our different social media channels. So probably also, of course, LinkedIn, but also on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. and on YouTube, and it's afterwards uploaded to YouTube. And Nimsy Live is run by Tucker, who is he was one of our founders, and he is loving the live streams. He's Mr. Livestream now, I think. He's on, it seems he's there 24/7.
Feels like it, yeah, in a
He's
good
everywhere.
way.
I had also started my own live stream called Last Week in Localization, but I've been neglecting that one actually for the last few weeks when I was finishing up the Nimsy 100, our ranking and then analysis of the size and state of the language services market. And that's probably what you were referencing there, because we did, when the whole thing was finished, we had a live stream where we talked about some of the main findings. It was together with Renato Beninato, our other co-founder, and a few other of my wonderful colleagues who all contributed to the report. And so definitely I will be back doing Last Week in Localization and potentially other live streams. So yes, you can see my face there, and
Great stuff. Yeah. Alex, when's your next Insta live? Or I don't know. Are you on Clubhouse?
Insta
Something
live,
like I don't know. You have to do. You gotta be doing some live streaming, Alex. Do the hustle
Well, I'm doing live streaming from
from the booth.
I'm leaving. Goodbye.
you can join my live stream, Alex. I'll have you on. As a
I'll be the
guest.
background dancer. The audience can't see, but I'm doing.
Alex has already been a guest on my YouTube channel, Inside Interpreting, new video coming in the next 10 days.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm doing live streaming from the booth, I guess.
Booths around the world.
Into like a streaming for a streaming audience. I don't know. No,
That's
but
true.
I'm pretty much just gonna be working. I mean, I've been working. It's been very busy, and I think I'll just be enjoying a couple nights off when we're not doing podcast stuff. I mean, there's always enough stuff to do. We have the network, our Konferenzdolmetscher Deutschland network. We have another new website for Munich called Babylon Interpreting, which is another network, another local network. So, there's a lot of stuff going on that's kind of happening behind the scenes. And I'm usually kind of dabbling a little bit in making those things happen. So, I'm trust and believe I'm keeping busy.
Yeah. It just occurred to me that actually, with Sarah doing so much research and live streaming and Jonathan branching out into church interpreting, you're kind of the last conference interpreter standing from the four of us in a way. So that's good too. That's quite an achievement. Because I have changed jobs. Actually, I think we've never talked about this on the show, which we don't have.
Not officially, no.
But I actually moved out of conference interpreting in the last summer, so I'm now a communications guy, something with media, as they say in Germany, was mit Medien. And I work for the European Parliament's translation service. I haven't strayed too far, but so I might also pop up here and there, and I'm still quite active on social media, but will also not be appearing on this show at least. And I think that brings us to the future of the show, the future of Troublesome Terps, because we did say in the very beginning that this is the last episode with the four of us, but it does not necessarily mean the end of the show, right? Because it was our baby. I mean, we started the whole podcast, but it doesn't mean that it could not continue without us. So one thing that we wanted to offer to you, to the listeners or the community, is that you can use this platform, because we've set it all up. We have the infrastructure. We know how to record a show. We know how to edit it. We have a website. We're in all the big directories for podcasts, and Jonathan just mentioned earlier that can be difficult and can take some time until you're really everywhere. So I guess our invitation to you is that if you have an idea for a troublesome topic, and it could just be one, you don't have to commit to do 100 episodes, although that would be great, I guess. But if you have an idea and maybe a few people that you think would be great on a podcast panel to do a discussion, we're happy to help. I'm happy to help. So I'm happy to stay behind the scenes and help you with that. But that's kind of our idea for keeping the show going, just in a very different way, I guess.
It's very non-committal. I think the way we kind of liken it to the Translation Talk Twitter account, which, just kind of changed on a regular basis. Somebody new took over. talked about stuff that was important to them, and the podcast could go a similar route. So if you do have anything that you find interesting, even if it's just a one-off, if you and your best booth mate have something, or if you just want to find some people randomly on Twitter who find the same topic interesting as you do, then you guys can just get together, record the episode, let us know, and then we'll put it on for everybody to listen to. Because I'm sure if you find something interesting, there's a ton of other people who would find the same thing interesting or controversial or troublesome or whatever it may be.
Exactly. So in that sense, we are handing over the podcast to you. It is all set up and ripe for the picking.
I guess keep it classy.
It's probably right to do so.
Nothing fishy and that kind of thing, but I guess I think you know where we're going with this.
Stay classy, San Diego.
We've said thank you to the guests already, but I think the listeners have really been incredible. I think I'll never forget the first time I got an email saying that we were in the top 10 culture podcasts in Angola. Shout out to all our listeners in Angola, all Hello 10 of you. But it's really strange. You don't do things for the numbers, but it has been incredible to realise that there are that many people who wanted to listen to an interpreting podcast. And yeah, I'm believing that most of the downloads that show up on stats are real people and not bots just going click. But the tweets and the emails and the I was at a conference somewhere and someone kind of tapped me on the shoulder and said that I didn't have a clue what you look like, but I would recognise that voice anywhere. Apparently I have an accent.
But yes, I completely agree. Well, of course, we have to thank our guests a lot, when we're very grateful to have had them. I think we need to thank our listeners even more, because it would all be pointless if nobody was listening. I mean, it would still be nice to just be chatting to you guys.
Yeah, I know.
It is always so nice to just chat to you guys. But still, it might make it a little bit more pointless if then we put it out and nobody was listening to it.
That is true.
Just get our mums listening in, and so that's lovely.
But it is actually the listeners who made the podcast what it was, right? I mean, you guys really pushed us. You came to the live event, which is something that the Alex and Jonathan, they can tell you. I was not sure anybody was going to show up. I was, I had nightmares that it was just going to be the three of us. But you did show up.
Yeah, I remember actually, Alex, when I was just a guest on the show as well during my episode, that the Alex, who currently has a red head from giggling as well, was giggling a lot as well. And I was constantly unsure, what does it mean?
Yeah. Is it me?
Is he laughing at me?
Is it an agreeing giggling or a shocked giggling? Or
it could be all of those things at the same time.
But I still thought you were very nice. Yeah.
It's contextual.
Alex G and I met on the ITI board, and apparently there was serious talk of splitting us up at board meetings.
Well, like the bad kids sitting in the back of the school, right? Yeah, it's always the same. Oh my god.
Yeah, we really have to thank the listeners, and I think all of the comments, all of the lovely emails, all of the people who've retweeted the show, all the people who've recommended the show. I mean, I'm under no illusions. I know fine well that this show grew because people liked it and asked someone else to listen to it and passed it on. I've heard tales of people telling their interpreting students to listen to it. If you're an interpreting student, well done. It's been an incredible ride. It's been an absolutely incredible ride.
It has.
And it's been an honour to share it with you three. In a way it's sad, but in a way it's like... It's like a little bird that's grown up. It started off a little bit rough around the edges. It got fed enough worms. It grew. It got stronger. It learned to tweet. It learned to be noisy. It started flapping its wings, and now the little birdie is leaving the nest and is going to be in the care of the interpreting community. And we all know how universally caring and kind the interpreting community is.